Thank you, Presiding Officer. Looking at the franchise as the first issue, it opposed, starting with the 1832 Great Reform Act, or the first Reform Act, and the Scottish equivalent, which incidentally took the vote away from women who actually had the vote before that period. The Tories opposed. The Pittite faction had its fingerprints all over that. They also opposed the taking away of the property qualification. The Tories opposed that. The only time when the Tories had any momentary point of self-doubt was the 1922 election, when Winston Churchill lost his seat in Dundee to a Scottish Prohibitionist party in a hangover from the pre-1832 provisions, whereby boroughs elected multiple members and Dundee elected two. You only had one vote, but you elected two members, and Winston Churchill came third. He didn't think much of the system then. When my mother first got her right to vote, she had to wait till she was 30. When she did get that right to vote, she had 2 votes because she was a university graduate. Every stage of the way, major changes have been resisted by the Tories. Plus ça change, plus ça même chose. Nothing changes. I will now that I've completed my point, Mr Tompkins.
Adam Tompkins.
I'm excessively grateful to the member for taking an intervention. Surely in this wonderful and not entirely accurate history of Conservative franchise reform, he's not going to overlook the 1867 Act, which was premiered by Benjamin Disraeli, a Conservative Prime Minister, the biggest single increase in the franchise in the 19th century.
Correct, and indeed it led to the introduction of the first secret votes, because the doubling in the franchise that derived from the 3 acts that followed from that, because it wasn't one act, there were over 4 years period, there were a number of acts. The first secret franchise, which took place in August, if I recall correctly, and you talked about a by-election, but I'm slightly uncertain about that one. It's not in my notes, Mr Tompkins, I do apologise. But the bottom line is, we've had a number of things about residency and so on and so forth. I think we need to be cautious about the idea of taking away the right to vote from residents who are citizens of other countries. Because, of course, and I have 3 family members to whom this applies, who are not resident in the UK, are resident in other countries, some in the EU and some elsewhere, who have the right to vote even though they're not citizens of that country. We interfere with the rights of people in this country, I think you might see reciprocal action elsewhere. But that's speculation, not certainty, and I can't be certain. I very much support the provisions on qualification. Now, more fundamentally, I think, on the issue of prisons, I absolutely suggest that when a prisoner is in prison, being deprived of the liberty, that is both a punishment and it may well be a protection for society. But at the end of the day, in other jurisdictions, and I have a niece who's now a Swedish citizen because of Brexit, I'm particularly well informed on there, that you find that the better the connections that are retained between people who have to be deprived of their liberty and the possibility of resuming their life in a proper fashion after prison is enhanced by the number of civic connections that they have with a pre-existing life. Being able to retain their house, their residency, their connections to their family, and indeed the right to vote. It is not that there is a single measure makes a difference. It is the aggregation of all the measures that provide assistance. And we do know in our own jurisdiction that when we send someone to prison, we reduce the chances of their rehabilitation being effective. We increase the chance of their recidivism. So there is a more general point about that. Now, like others, I've considerable experience since coming here. I've attended 278 Justice Committee meetings. I've visited prisons, not been in prisons, in Scotland, Wales, in France, and in the Republic of Georgia in the Caucasus. Different jurisdictions do things in different ways. But the bottom line is that we've got to think about the practical effects. I support what we're trying to do. I do think there are a couple of things we can think about. The 12 months rule is a relatively arbitrary one, but it's simple to understand and it has that great merit. And we could tweak it if we think it should be another figure. I kind of thought it might be the difference between a summary procedure and a solemn procedure under which you might get convicted. But I think that would be actually more complicated. I think the bill at section 7.4, there's a wee difficulty I've got in my mind the way it's constructed, because it talks about the date of the election. But proxies, of course, can be postal proxies, so votes can be casted before the date of the election in a strict sense. And I think there's a wee drafting issue that it may be worth revisiting. Uninterrupted residence, it's possible to have multiple places of residence, as I, and perhaps some colleagues here do, both in my constituency and my house here. I'm not allowed to vote in the same election twice, but I'm allowed to be registered in the electoral register twice. I choose not to, I hasten to add. So I think there are wee issues around that as well. I strongly support provisions of this bill, not simply because of issues around ECHR or court cases, but simply because I think it is a modest and useful contribution to rehabilitating prisoners as they return to society, preventing the total disconnection that too much of the prison system does. And finally, can I congratulate Tom Fox, whom we all know as our connection with the SPS. He retires at 5 o'clock today.